Hello, this is Chris. Back with Flip.
Hi.
What you been doing? You've been playing music.
I've been busy with musics and hospitals mostly. That's
Fun.
why we haven't podcasted for a long time. Some combination of
Yeah.
musics and hospital. But we just ordered an amp for me to use because that's the thing we need most critically is we're short on ampage, and we'll pay
What
for
kind of
that.
amp? Is it
Gigs coming up.
electric or?
No, like a Fender Champ 100. It's the kind of thing that 15 years ago I looked down on, even though I never had money for fancy stuff. I only ever had one fancy amp in my life, and then I had to sell it to make rent. But like for the purposes of what I'm doing, like it's fine because I'm doing like Brazilian stuff, and there's 8,000 drums. If you're Dinosaur Jr., you want your chain of all tube vintage stuff. For me, Fender Champ will just be fine. And I'm on the lookout for a cheap playable telly. Let me know if you see any good tellies around.
I got a Jaguar I just bought that's giving me hell. If you want
So
to
I was
come
going to
try
ask
this out.
about that because I heard about that and I was dripping in jealousy because I love
I've already.
Jaguars in principle, but or a Jazzmaster. You had a Jazzmaster
Yeah,
because
Jazz
I had
Master.
a Jaguar and like I wanted to like that guitar and I just never liked it. And the number one complaint that like if you go online and talk to nerds, like the number one complaint about the Jaguar and Jazzmaster is that they're over engineered.
Yeah, it keeps falling apart on me mid set, and then I have to like re-gadget all together to straighten it all out. And
It
I'm
doesn't have that weird threaded bridge, right? It's got individual string saddles, doesn't it?
no, I think it's got that threaded bridge. That's part of the problem.
Oh,
Is
so
something like pokes
the
off and flips off
number
of that, and then I'm screwed. And then all of a sudden I can't play a fret, and it pings. And
I think it's called Master Saddles. I don't remember. There is a company that well, I think all they do, I mean, maybe they branched out, but there is a company that makes saddles for Jaguars and Jazzmasters to fix your
so
$2,000
it's
factory
not a
Jaguar.
thing that I just found out. Okay, well
Yeah, no,
I should come bring
it
it to
goes
you and
back
have
to the
you
very
take a
beginning.
look at it.
It's actually to me, it's kind of interesting to show just like how much, like even in not even in the world, everywhere it is, where there's so much woo, and we look back and we say, oh, the Beach Boys played a Jaguar. I love the Beach Boys. I want a Jaguar, and then you come to find out, like, oh, there's a reason why these aren't terribly popular. You know?
Yeah, well, it's given me hell so far, and I bought the dumb thing thinking that it was gonna be like my juggernaut that could get me through other stuff because my
Well, yeah,
other guitars were being finicky.
because you look at Nils Klein, right? Nils Klein,
Yeah,
that
uh-huh.
guy is the all-time Lord and Master of Jazz Masters.
Yeah,
He's the Jazz Master
that's the
Master.
reason I got it. Stupid Niels.
Yeah, you're
But
a noob. But I
I
guarantee you, if you look closely at Nils Jazz Master, that's not a factory bridge. It'll be an
yeah.
aftermarket bridge
Well,
that
that
they
makes sense
installed
because yeah,
to
it's like the
fix that.
strings are just sitting there, something flicks on there, and then suddenly frets aren't working above the 12th, and it happens mid-song, mid-show twice now. So
Yeah, like my Jaguar came with it had so many stupid things on it because that's part of what attracted to me. Is like I like gizmological things, and the Jaguar had a lot of little switches, and I
yeah,
think,
it has
oh, that
all
must be a lot of
that.
stuff.
I
Most of the
actually
switches
like
are
that because
useless.
I could switch on my guitar and get a real quick, totally different tone that I absolutely set up. But
But see, like I found with my Jaguar, like part of the problem is like switching any of those switches, like I'd have to adjust the volume on my amp
yeah,
because
for
the
sure.
outputs were so different. And then the Jaguar came with them. It had this stupid mute because, like, for some reason, Leo Fender thought that palm muting
My other guitar's got a
was too
mute on
much.
it, and it throws me off all the time
Yeah,
too.
because
But
like
that one was having problems.
if
They're
you
all
en-
having problems. That's why I
yeah,
got the dumb thing.
if you engage the mute, not only does it not sound as good as palm muting, it also sharpens the whole guitar by a half step. It's just
Oh, really?
garbage. Yeah, it's just garbage.
Oh man, yeah,
Like I'm
it's pretty
angry that they
annoying.
stole that guitar, but it's only because I was about to sell it when my guitar got stolen. But yeah, like
I
those
remember
guitars
your
can be
Jaguar.
cool, but factory coming from the factory, they're no good. They need to be set up by proper
Well,
boosters
first
or
off, well,
whatever.
I went back in and the guy did it right in front of me, and I saw how to do it, and I could probably do that all myself. The problem is that I'd have to do it all the time, but it doesn't make it through 3 hours without falling back out again. I'm sure it's got that problem. That's the thing that's causing me problems.
Yeah, there's a whole Mastery Bridge. That's the company.
So
These guys are in business to fix extremely expensive vintage guitars. And you look at them, they're beautiful. It's all like computer machined. They're really nice.
Stupid old me. Anyway, well, I got my other guitars back, so they'll be okay for a month until they break apart too. So it feels like I'm fidgeting with nice stuff, and I just want to try to get some stupid thing that always works, just always stays in tune. I don't even care after that, but whatever.
How's that Gretsch working out?
It's good, but it's got intonation weirdness. So if I put a capo on a seventh, I'm almost like a whole tone off, you know? And so
Jeez.
then I've taken it in a couple times to have them work on it. It gets a little back. It's probably because I drive around and leave it in cars and stuff like that. But
Yeah, it's still it should be more. Well, see, and then conversely, like because the guitar I've been using mostly for these shows, for the electric anyway, is Jorginho's Mexican Squire that he bought for $200 or $300 in I think 93, 94.
and I
He
bet you
found
it's
a
what I've
gem.
been trying to look for. I've been
Yeah,
trying to just look for
this
something that's
this
simple
cheap
and
Mexican
works.
Squire, he's never had any work done on it. He's never had it set up, nothing. He just and he's played it, for all these years, and now I'm playing it. Sounds great. It's straight because I have played $1,000 Fenders that are not as nice as
Well,
that cheapo little Mexican
my
Squire.
Strat it's put together. I put it together myself, well, with the help of a bunch of different people, and now a bunch of different techs who've all worked at it at different times, and it's still, well, it might be working right now. It's pretty good right now. Guitar talk. All right, let's talk about nutty received opinions. That's what I was going to name this one, received opinions, but I don't know if we'll get to everything because you only got an hour to roll, but I
Johnny
tried
Depp
to.
played guitar with Jeff Beck.
Yeah,
See
he
that?
also played with what's his name from Perry from Aerosmith. They
Huh.
had a whole band together. Was Beck in that one too? They're all
No,
together.
Jeff Beck, the old British blues guy.
Yeah. I know he
Yeah.
played around with them,
Oh,
but they started one little band that they toured for 1 year. You can watch videos of it,
yeah.
and Johnny was doing the rhythm guitar in it, and it was I think it was Perry from Aerosmith, and I
Steve
think Beck
Perry.
was in there. Yeah, Perry. But anyway, looks like this went Johnny Depp's way, but.
Yeah. I sent you these.
Yeah, I copied some of them just to zip through them. All these things that obviously tilt towards trying to make us feel the empathy for a poor little lady and make sure to keep the Me Too movement rolling along.
Nobody will give Amber Heard a break in this life.
It'll never work out
A
for her.
beautiful, wealthy blonde woman just cannot make
So
it
there's
their
money
way.
owed. I like that little phrase right there. It might be too small on the screen, but it's like her says Johnny Depp fabricated claims against. Let's see. And this side says Amber just awarded money. Why the internet thinks Amber Heard's a joke. We've seen all sorts of defenders of Amber Heard and trying to hold on to the line.
Well,
I
these
saw.
BBC articles, what gets me about them is like, there's all this talking around it, where it's like, there was a trial with evidence and testimony. And then it just the evidence and testimony literally doesn't come up. They just talk around all these, just the general idea. Well, there exist out there people who don't believe women.
I don't have a clip from it, but I was watching Dan Reynolds on Lex Friedman. It's ridiculous
Did
to bring him on.
you get yourself through that whole thing?
I'm
I
about
made it
3/4 the way
45
through.
seconds. I made it 45 seconds, and I'm just like, no, can't do
Well,
this.
it's because I'm listening to it to be annoyed, to find something to pull to be annoyed. So I tough through it. A lot of these different things I tough through, and I get tired of toughing it through them. But I mean, I listened to so many different lefty YouTube things about gun control this week, and my head could just roll off the desk here from that stuff. But he said the thing I was telling you last night. How did he word it? He's like, oh, they both just had such a hard time, and their hearts are hurting, and you don't know what people are doing when their hearts are hurting, and you got to think about both the people. And Johnny Depp, you got to realize he's charismatic and all that stuff. As if she's not some celebrity, like she was on the cover of the magazines of like most beautiful woman alive and all that sorts of stuff. Yeah, we're supposed to feel empathy for her. She outright lied. Tim Pools had a guy on last night who was pretty expert in it. She hired an ACLU lawyer to draft up the thing that she got sued about. An ACLU lawyer wrote the entire, I don't know, screed that she put out to the Washington Post. So it was already all lawyerly trying to protect her in some sort of way that she was putting this thing out. And she was also being hired at the time to be a spokesperson for Me Too. And you'd think this would be a dagger in Me Too, but no, right in the middle of this trial, Fred Savage went down, Bill Murray went down. There's probably been 4 or 5 other ones.
We were talked about that somebody made the claim that like, oh, well, wealthy, famous men don't ever get punished for these things. Like, the world started yesterday. If you start today, that's true.
Yeah, I like this when Amber Heard verdict sends a message to Black women everywhere. And Part of why I wanted to pull this up and some other things is all the time there's always that ratchet and a ratchet left, and a win against them is still a win for them. They will still use it to ratchet more left, ratchet left. They all picked up Amber Heard's little response to it here.
The thing about black women everywhere, and I just like immediately my mind jumps to Uganda, where a few years ago, I think it was Uganda. It might be. I'm doing the dumb white guy thing where I can't remember which Central African nation I'm thinking of, but it was in the news where because the government a few years ago, under enormous pressure from evil colonialist Westerners, passed a law outlawing female genital mutilation, and like apparently in the rural areas of this country, there was like one particular woman who was like the grandmother of performing FGM. And so they arrested her and put her in jail. And tens of thousands of Ugandan women took to the streets to demand her release. These are the black women everywhere the Root thinks they're talking about. It's just utter nonsense. It's just so strange that they think that, first off, that they think that a skin tone comprises a social group. That's just so strange. It's so bizarre. And then, like, meanwhile, in Africa, where all the black people are, majority. I mean, I wonder, like, if you do I actually have no idea. Like, if you did like a pie graph of where do African people of African descent live now, how many of them are in Africa and how many of them aren't? But anyway, yeah, it's just so insane.
It so doesn't follow anyway, too. This
Yeah, it
is a
doesn't follow
jury
anything, 'cause,
thing.
like-
This is a jury awarding what they felt or didn't believe. And I
And we're
bet you
talking
if
about-
you were a black woman in today's modern juries, you would have an increased chance of.
And these are like they're Hollywood stars with millions of dollars. Like none of it fits.
Yeah.
But like this goes to show, I mean, it's like any type of religious belief. You make the world fit your conclusions and start there.
Yeah. And then, of course, all the news media picked up her immediate response that she already had typed up. The disappointment I feel today, and women and me too, and Johnny's attorneys and the money, the difference in money that he had against me, as if you aren't some rich millionaire who had his money in your hand already.
Yeah.
You used his money to.
Yeah. Also, there was evidence and testimony. Let's not forget that we had a whole trial with evidence and testimony.
Yeah.
Okay.
I listened to a ton of
it,
it, and everybody who's apologizing for her, Dan Reynolds saying, "Oh, it's both sides, both ways." No, she was a histrionic, disordered nutbag and crazy, and certainly just going around trying to make some sort of case against Johnny all along, and just taking the weakest evidence that got torn apart and shown to just be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's a level of this that, I mean, Flip and I and whoever, I mean, maybe you've gotten a lucky chance to put up with it in your life to realize that the concept of believe all women is ridiculous. And there's a lot of women in this world, I believe, because they're honest people. But
Yeah.
I've had direct interactions with dishonest women, and I've never had one make a false claim against me in like reality, but I did have one close to me. I won't say who it was, but she in a room with me, just me and her in the room together, she made lies. She started like reciting lies right to my face, showing me that like in power move to say, look, I could make up these lies about you. Are you ready for this? And just sitting there, just kind of rattling them off and something about Amber Heard reminded me of that moment big time, the way she was going around taking pictures and just building up a backup case since long before.
For me, there's the big ones, like, I mean, because I am a victim of a lying woman, more than one. But, like, not even getting into that stuff, because that's the major trauma. But even something that, like, honestly, I don't think about a lot, and it just sprang into my mind, you talking about it. And, this happened long before I had any consciousness of what was really going on with all of the critical theory and feminism and all this stuff. But that was when I was 18, and I was out of high school, and I worked at the airport and at the snack bar. And one day there was a new employee, and I'm like, "Oh, don't I know you?" And she's like, "Yeah, you went to the high school we went to." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I haven't been in that high school for years, but." And then she says, "Do you still see Jane?" And I'm like, "Jane? I haven't talked to Jane in 3 years." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, I we hung out in junior high and we talked on the phone, but I haven't talked to her in years." She's like, "Jane said that you guys were dating." I'm like, "What? No, like we never dated." no. Like we were
I've
friends
had
in junior
that
high,
too.
and we talked on the phone. She's like, Jane said that you guys were sleeping together and that you beat her.
Beat?
And yeah, and I'm like, no, Jane and I never dated. I haven't laid eyes on her in 5 years, and I haven't talked to her in 3 years. And
I've had the
yeah.
false claims of having dated somebody who I didn't
And
date.
so this whole thing happened because, I changed high schools. Like in 10th grade or 9th grade, I was in one high school for a period, and that with Jane, and then I went to another high school. And so I was long gone, and apparently this person was going around telling people that I was her violent sex partner. And like, because at the time and it didn't even really hit me that hard. I was like, God, that's really weird. And now looking back now, I wonder, like, because how many of my friends, because I knew a lot of people at that school, how
Think
many
that
of them
that's
to this
true?
day are like, oh yeah, Flip is the guy that beat up that
I
girl
heard
back
he
in high
did this
school.
and that and this.
Yeah,
I heard it.
and then that just rolled over me. And then later on in life, I had people do actual, real, serious damage to me with lies, these Amber Heard type lies. But
It's real, and I've been there to defend or get to the bottom of it for certain people sometimes in work situations, and sometimes I find out that it's absolutely true. I've been involved in calling the police because I caught somebody doing something terrible to a woman, and that whole deal. It's true sometimes, and I have caught them in red-handed lies. I've said that before. I've caught them in red-handed lies. A lot of times in this Amber Heardy way that she got caught on tape saying, bragging to people or bragging to the person that they'll never believe you. I've caught that in real life.
also, she makes the claim that, like, oh yeah, I hit you, but I'm a girl.
I'm
That
a
doesn't
girl
matter.
and no one's gonna believe you, and no one's gonna trust anything
Yeah.
you say.
I don't know if I should even say this. These people are still alive. They're never going to watch this. I saw my mom physically assault my dad on at least a weekly basis, at
Mhm.
least. And my dad never did anything but retreat and defend, like defensive motions. I never saw my dad lay a hand, as they say, on my mom, ever. My mom assaulted him constantly and emotionally. Most of the abuse was emotional, but there was one day that my mom was mad at my dad for something and grabbed his arm and dug her nails into his arm down to the bone. And so he got in the car with my brother and they went to the Instacare. He needed stitches. Like my mom did this
Mhm.
with her hand, and my mom is a little Brazilian lady. Oh, she's just a harm. Oh, the girls
Yeah.
can't hurt men. And my dad, they're stitching him up, and they said, "What happened?" And my dad said, "My wife did this to me." And they replied, "Well, what does she look like?" Implying that
That it matters.
what they were stitching up was the defensive wound. That was the
Oh,
implication.
oh,
That
wow.
yeah.
See, my brain doesn't even go there because
Yeah,
I
exactly. Because like
treat
you think
humans
like
like
IHC at that point should have been on the phone, right? If the roles were reversed and a woman came in and said, "Why are we stitching up your arm? My husband did this to me." Somebody surreptitiously slinks out of the room and gets on the phone with the police. We know that's how that works, but
well,
that's just how
I
that is.
I had a lot of similar experiences, not saying
Patriarchy.
that happened with my parents, but I've witnessed that situation that you're talking about. I've witnessed it a whole lot. In the ward I grew up with, you're a little kid and you get the insight into a lot of different families. You go to a lot of kids' houses and you're around when parents and people are acting that way. And we might get to Kara talking about patriarchy a little bit later. And all these people fussing about patriarchy in the Mormon church. It's a little bit like the concept that I got into yesterday with or the other day with the dissident right people who point out that the left controls all the mid-level institutions. They control everything, but once in a while you get somebody who's the boss and in charge. And to me, that's almost a little bit how I see what they call patriarchy too.
Yeah.
Like they're getting steered around so hard by the women. It doesn't matter. They get to call themselves bishop.
No,
In the ward I grew up in, it was henpecked men
no.
to
This
death
is one of the other.
everywhere.
I mean, because my dad was inactive, and this is one of those things. Like it wasn't until I was an adult and well out of the church that I started to put it all together. But when I was a kid, my mom brought it up constantly, and she would say it angrily. She would say it in fights. She would say it privately with us in hushed tones. Your father doesn't go to church. Normally, when I do this, I do my mom's accent. For the podcast, I won't imitate her accent. Your father doesn't go to church. Your father doesn't go to church. But then as later on, I realized, like, well, you badmouth him to everybody there. You go to the bishop and say what a giant turd he is, and that he drinks beer, and that you don't like him. He doesn't work hard enough. He doesn't make enough money, and he's not serving his priesthood. And like, why would he go there? Why would he want to go to church when he knows that you have poisoned everyone there? But patriarchy, right? No, like my mom used the church's fetishization of protecting women as a psychological emotional assault on my dad and put him in a perfect trap. Because if he went to church, he had to go there where everybody thought he was a piece of crap and knew all of his secrets. And if he doesn't go to church, well, he doesn't go to church.
No,
You
there's
know, it's a
only
total
male
double
aggression in
time.
the world. That's the only
Yeah,
thing that's bad. It's a once again, I'll make a parallel. You can like male aggression between female aggression is a little bit like the concept of repressive tolerance. You have to tolerate the left, the people that you sympathize and empathize with, and infantilize in their horrible violence. But any little stitch of even a hint of a whiff of violence from the right, we got to freak out about it. It's almost exactly grafted onto females and males. You know,
totally.
we've got to just totally accept that their violence is as we got to empathize with them, and any sort of male anything even hinting towards it, and
Well, that's
sound
it.
the
And
alarm bells.
feminists don't hesitate to bring up, like Amber Heard did on tape, has in evidence, exhibit whatever, 31B in the trial that we all saw. Amber repeated it. We've all heard it a million times. Feminists say it all the time. Well, even if women do hit men, men are stronger. Which, like,
Yeah.
are they, Leah
Female
Thompson?
aggression doesn't count.
Like, wait,
I've
you're telling me there's a biological difference between men and women?
I've followed the this podcast called Real Crime Profile, and every once in a while they do interesting stuff. But they are these ex-FBI agents who so fully gargle the Duluth model of belief that it's always the man,
Yeah.
and you better look at the man first, and knock off this due process. You got to think of the man's the one who's doing it, and they of course took the simple line with this Depp Heard case and said all this stuff too, like, oh, I can't believe he had all sorts of stuff that seems like coercive control. So even if she was doing bad stuff, he probably caused it, which is part of the Duluth model construals that they do. One of the nice things about it is even like fans of that podcast, I saw a bunch of pushback on them making those nutty claims. All these people saying, what are you guys talking about? If you actually listen to this, I think it might be like a red pillish moment for a lot of normie type people who really listen to that trial, but maybe not. And like we said, the Me Too thing will just juggernaut on. Some lady will probably come out next week and say, so and so did something naughty to me. I'm not going to say what. And
So
but
just to check, because you brought up the Duluth model, which is funny because in all of my arguments with my feminist family or anybody else, because everybody always brings up the question, well, how did feminism hurt you? And I always say, what's the Duluth model? And they either don't know or they pretend not to know them. And yeah, did you find that? Just scroll down to the table of contents. Because the reason I just Googled Duluth model Utah, and it's because many years ago, probably at least 7 or 8 years ago, I did this. And I found a Utah State Department of Health domestic violence training that directly references the Duluth model. In this case, I just Googled it again to see what would come up. And this is one of the first things I found, literally. This is absolutely being used,
yeah,
and it is literally based on nothing. Like,
it requires ignoring all sorts of evidence,
men
but
are violent and do all the violence, and that's how that works. I'm not sure if I can find it. Maybe it's gone now, because like a few years ago I looked up, I was able to go to it. They had a PowerPoint slide. In the slide it says, while women can perpetrate domestic violence, the vast majority of violence is perpetrated by men. That's just an outright lie. That's a statistical lie, and they say that, and they specifically references the Duluth model. So it's totally circular and it's made up.
and it also
But this is
requires them qualifying whatever they call violence too.
But the point is that, like, the Duluth model is built into the family law system. And the
Oh yeah,
Duluth model says to assume that the male is abusive. Literally, that's what it says. The assumption is the male is abusive and the woman is the abused. And it specifically carves out that just because a woman, like, just because you might see the woman acting abusive, that's just her defending herself in the moment. The reality is that she is the abused. There you go. You brought that up. Like, and it's one of those things that's creepy to me, where it's like, I don't know how many of the feminists are playing dumb and are genuinely ignorant.
what's
You
funny
know, because
about it
like,
is the big pushback against it is Kendi-ish pushbacks because it negatively affects
oh
minority community. But
yeah.
they never would have thought about how they've negatively affected Johnny Depp.
If you look up the wheel of power and control, because I saw this the first time when I was in a doctor's office, And again, this was long before I was aware of what any of this was really about. And I looked at this, and I remember at the time thinking, like, that's weird. That's obviously sexist and makes a lot of assumptions, but that's directly out of the Duluth model. And I guarantee that if you went now to any battered women's shelter, you will find the Wheel of Power posted around. You can look, or what Wheel of Power and Control, and you can look it up. Yeah, see, one of the things is using male privilege.
Mhm.
You know, it assumes that women have no power. There is no such thing, because, like, yeah, sure, maybe there's something called male privilege, but if there
They
is, there
use
absolutely is female privilege too.
they use the term coercive control, and that term coercive control can be used to make it. Gad Sad used to have this joke. I shouldn't jump this part of stuff, but it was his Chomsky joke. It's like the 6 degrees of it's the U.S.'s fault.
Oh yeah,
No matter any sort of thing you point in the world, you can make it the U.S.'s fault in 6 degrees. That coercive control thing is in 2 degrees. You can make anything, any horrible thing that the woman does, the male's fault. Anything.
uh-oh.
If she kills him, you can make it the male's fault. And you and I have gone over a million different times. We look up female serial killers, and if you look up the descriptions of female serial killers or male serial killers, every single thing that they say about the female serial killer has some sort of empathetic description of why they were coerced into doing, or
Yeah.
how life made things tough on them and made them decide to fall into that life of crime.
Yeah, Fred and
But
Rosemary. What are their last names? Because I've gone down this rabbit hole a lot. And things like, and the fact is, it's true that, like, the vast majority of violent people are men, but there are some women that are just as evil as the evilest men. I mean, off the top of my head, Catherine Knight. That's an Australian lady that cut off her husband's head and put it in a pot. She cut off her husband's head and then put it on a plate and left it, like, as she'd set up dinner for his kids, I
wow.
mean, when he came home. And that was a case where he actually told his coworkers, if something happened to me, call the police. It was Catherine. And he tried to get help, but, like, because, Australia is super feminist. You're
Yeah.
not going to get any domestic violence assistance from the police there when you're a man. Geez, Bettina Arndt, she covers that stuff great. Look up her. She's an Australian men's
Yeah,
right
she's great.
activist. She's
Yeah,
awesome.
she does a lot of stuff about like comparing housework and who does the most work type stuff
Who's
with
it?
actual stats.
Fred and
But
what's her name? Rosemary West. Yeah. If you want to hear about an evil woman, look up Rosemary West. Now, granted, she was in a team with an evil man.
yeah.
If you read her stories, she did plenty on her own without any help from Fred.
Well, I mean, you can say true on average that thing that
Yeah.
feminists don't like if Peterson ever says it the other direction,
Yeah.
and I fully accept it as sure on average,
Yeah.
males are more violent,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that doesn't mean that there's zero the other way, or even that it's just a one or two variations one
Yeah.
direction.
No, this is something I thought about a lot, where, like, in imaginary arguments with feminists, because they won't talk to you very long, they'll happily bring out, like, men are violent. It's like, okay. Or let's I can go back and say, like, well, men are stronger than women. Men have power because they're physically stronger. And I was like, would you rather be stronger or nicer? Like, would you rather be taller or live 10 years longer? Would you rather be good at spatial engineering or have friends? You know, like, because, like, it's true that, like, if you look, like, there are these
There's
distributions,
trade-offs.
but there's trade-offs, like, but really, like, because, like, I am tall and it is nice. I can reach high things. I will almost certainly die 10 to 20 years earlier than a
And a
woman that's a
tiny
foot
little,
than a little woman, because that's just how that works.
yeah.
It's just how that works. I've got super autistic brain. I'm a smart guy in certain ways, but I'm terrible at, like, emotional intelligence. I suck at that. And that's things like, if women look at me and say, "Oh, I wish that I was big and tall and could reach things and felt safer walking down the street," I understand you with you. I empathize with you. I wish I had the emotional intelligence of the average woman, because, they seem to be able to navigate society with much less difficulty than
They get
me.
favored in ways that seems nice.
Yeah.
No, no, only patriarchy gives favor. You just be a white male and everybody
Yeah.
just stops and rolls out the red carpet
Yeah.
for you. I think it's kind of funny because one of the arguments against Kendi's disparity stuff is if everybody's equal and average and equal, how come there's this disparity in prisons or something like that? And you say, well, why is there a disparity? between men and women in prisons. You'll get that meme, that thing of the NPC's face going mad type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where, like, I mean, because they are projecting their bad thinking onto. Because, like,
Yeah.
I can look at American crime statistics, and I'm not so stupid as to think that, oh, black people, by virtue of being black, are more likely to commit crime. It's like, no. Because, like, for one thing, like, it's a tiny minority of the black community that is doing the crimes. If you just look at a graph, you can say, oh, what's exactly what the left likes to do when they say, like, well, most mass shooters are white,
Yeah.
and it's the exact same thing. It's like, oh, so you're saying whiteness caused that? They are saying that. I am not so stupid as to believe that being black is what's behind the statistics about crime in America. Like, this
Yeah. All
crime
the
is happening
examination.
it's a tiny percentage. It's happening in a fraction of the community, in a fraction of geographical. It's not black people. It's a tiny segment of them. But the way
Well,
we
since
do
Thomas Sowell
statistics,
always says you got to actually compare like for like, and you guys are never comparing like for like.
yeah,
Like, what's the
they
age
won't
of a
do that.
population? What's the whatever?
But I think it's like Thomas Sowell talked about, where, like, because they talked about, like, the murder rate in Colombia, and he said that, like, 90% of the shootings happened on 2% of streets. It's the same thing as, like, it's like when you talk about, like, oh, black gun death. Like, it's a few communities. We even say just Chicago, and it's not just Chicago. It's a relatively small geographical area in Chicago. You
Yeah.
know, these are like, it's not the black community doing
Hmm.
this, and to say that is stupid and racist. So, like, when these
But you
people
and you
say
group all that stuff
men,
together.
yeah, when they say
Like,
men
one
are,
of the things Thomas Sowell always points at is the black community. If you say blacks on average, well, the average of all blacks is a much younger rate, much younger age, the
oh
median
yeah,
and
that
mean
too.
than all whites on average. And so you're comparing, basically, if you turn them into one person, you're comparing 40-year-olds to 70-year-olds,
Oh
and
yeah, no,
that
like, he
those aren't
brings
going to
that
be
up
the same
exactly.
people.
Because they
Yeah.
say that, like, why do Asian immigrants make more money than Mexican immigrants? And he points out exactly because, like, because the average age of Asian immigrants is like 15 years older
Yeah,
than
it's
Mexican
all
immigrants.
based, you're doing a single variate analysis, and these are things that just basically obviously need multivariate analysis. But
But also just the understanding that, like, black, white, Asian American, Hispanic, these are not very useful categories. They are
mhm,
generalizations at best.
yeah,
But the left, the crazy left, wants these rigid categorizations because they think like Nazis.
yeah, and then you got the far right who
Yeah,
do it too.
yeah, exactly. Like, nobody sympathetic with the KKK runs a single university classroom in America.
They got the institutional power, and they're
Yeah.
pushing the same ideas.
Real quick, like, if you want to, did you ever see the Louis Theroux documentary where he just goes and hangs out with American neo-Nazis and KKK guys?
Yeah,
It should make you feel better because, like, guys, it really is just trailer trash, having barbecues and playing terrible rock music. They basically keep to themselves. They're
they're
not a
not going to
danger. Like,
organize,
yeah,
and anything that
they're not going to
doesn't
start any
like them
billion-dollar companies.
would
They're not going to.
squash them so quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't have any media outlets. They don't control the food supply.
But
Like,
even
it's
the
nothing to
percentage
worry
of
about.
them, they really honestly think the ones that aren't FBI agents, there's only
Yeah.
a few thousand of them in the entire
No, yeah, they
country.
say, like, even according to the FBI, like, you couldn't even fill a football stadium with all of the actual white supremacists in America.
Yeah,
Anyway, all
but
right, kicking
you
on.
can get people to hallucinate. But I actually got a
Yeah.
little clip about Larsen and that
Oh,
from just this week, some received opinions.
I should have watched
But
that.
I'll just have one little clip. But we got to hit it all in half an hour, 20 minutes here. It's the state's national new holiday month, and there's some memes on it. Mercedes-Benz, who will advertise one thing, all the companies are gonna advertise it, that they're with it. This meme up here is one that I pointed to. I posted this exact meme a few years ago as a joke, saying, "Hey, ha ha ha! Look, these guys are just going to act like their
Yeah.
neoconning is we paint rainbow on it. It's going to be okay." That's a legit meme. That's a
Yeah.
legit
No,
army
the army
meme.
posted that being serious.
Yeah, that's not a meme making fun of it.
The
That's the
the
real
bullets
one.
of death we rain down upon our enemies are now gay tolerant and accepting.
I mean, just imagine he actually using those bullets. Come on, man.
Oh, it's just kind of like when people said, "Oh, isn't it so exciting that we'll finally have a female black vice president?" I'm just like, She could be the first African American woman to bomb a Yemeni wedding party.
I
Just
think there's
what wonderful news.
I think there's some level of like the average normie's getting fed up with that stuff and starting to notice and see it, and the average gay person is realizing that they're being used. I think there's a breaking point happening with it.
I'm just laughing because I see BTS at the White House.
BTS went to the White House
Stupidest
to
thing
talk
ever.
about Asian hate as if they're actually going to do anything talking about what the actual issues going on there.
Well, and also it's just like, I mean, this whole thing belies the lie.
It's white
BTS is enormously popular in America. Nobody's like, I don't like them Asian music.
My very, very, very Mormon family, who I guess that must mean they should be QAnon, right? They're supersonic honky BTS fans. They just went to a BTS concert a few weeks ago. My nephew's dating an Asian woman, but that's also part of why they'll fall into this. They'll be like, yeah, we better do this. Because I was teasing, call them NPR Mormons, but they'll fall in and be like, oh, BTS said no Asian hate. We're against Asian hate. And they don't realize that what the media is kind of trying to paint is that it's them. The media is trying to paint it up that you guys are, you're the type that's the culprit.
Conservative, church-going white Americans are the haters.
That's the point. That's the angle. And
never mind that we have.
That's a little bit the same thing with this thing that you pulled up here. This people stealing gay flags, which again, repressive tolerance. If we know of situations where the opposite happened and they were called heroes for doing the opposite, or even going to the Y and changing the Y into something technically kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
they defaced or defamed the stuff, but they're hate crimes if it's done the other direction. Repressive tolerance.
Yeah.
And there's just more ratcheting left. The Sussman got. If you look deep into this whole thing,
see, that really threw me for a loop because, like, I feel like it's in the last 2 months that this news broke, and they're like, "Oh no, it's all done, adjudicated, we're done, trial's over." And you think about like 3.5 years of Trump investigation is how long it took them to come up with nothing.
What's funny too is I won't go into it here, but you can look up on anybody who's covered it in depth that the jury selection of that was a flaming joke. The conflict of interest is insane inside of it. And then there was, of course, an Obama appointee judge.
But again, they're not interested. Like Marcuse. Yeah. It's okay to use it for that. I mean, the Derek Chauvin trial, where on the day the trial began, a huge mob of activists who had just burned the city declared that if they didn't get the outcome they wanted, more violence was coming. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to pretend like, first off, the fact that the judge didn't go, okay, mistrial, we're done, we're going to another venue, like that right there shows that the whole thing was absolutely a farce. I mean, I'm still a little confused that they haven't already gotten an appeal on that. Just on that basis alone, a mob outside the courthouse said, do what we want or we're going to commit violence. That's a mistrial, but not in Marcuse.
Well, it was already like all insurgency because of the January 6th stuff, but all the people, I mean, there's been enough clips that are easily just as nutty about stuff going on in the courthouses right now, and they'll probably get worse as the stuff actually becomes real, but whatever. So listen, the Shapiro, just, oh my gosh, this reveals that we're kind of Nazis, right? We're showing a Jewish guy. God. He does a little clip of something that kind of came out and was popular in the news over the weekend. We'll just do a little 2 minutes here.
Segment of the country believes that people who disagree with them are the actual enemy and a severe threat to their neighbors. It's really a problem. It's really troubling. And it is clearer than ever that this is, in fact, the perspective, certainly of the mainstream media and, of course, many of their devotees, as well as their allies in government and politics. The reason that I say this is because there's an article that had wide traffic over the weekend, and it was from the Associated Press, and it was titled Christian Nationalism on the Rise in Some GOP Campaigns. And this has been sort of the new watchword. You've seen a lot of these watchwords that have been spouted by the left to conflate it with mainstream conservative. White supremacy is supposedly mainstream conservatism. Christian nationalism is supposedly.
I think the whole entire point of that Under the Banner of Heaven movie and book is to try to do this conflation of saying that all religious people are these wackadoodie fringe people and create that.
Because like even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that okay, that Christian nationalism is on the rise, we're talking about a tiny movement with no power going, on the rise from tiny to slightly less tiny. Because Christian nationalism is something that actually concerns me and has concerned me for a couple of decades and that I've followed. And so I've I followed enough to know that, like, watch out for it. They try to get into schools. They try to get into the military. They've succeeded in some ways. Usually First Amendment activists are able to shut them down. But they don't run any media companies. They don't run Amazon. They don't run the Senate and Congress. Like, Christian nationalists.
But
yeah,
if you
not a-
conflate any religious person as being them,
Yeah,
and
but
any
yeah,
sort of
that's the other
religious
thing. They say,
idea
oh,
that if somebody's
yeah.
against everybody who's against abortion is now automatically a Christian nationalist.
Yeah, exactly. There's
Anybody
that
who has a
too.
conservative opinions, and that's part of the stuff I'm going to point to. I don't know if I'll have to get all of it, but I have little. I was going to call this received opinions, but I saw stuff where Kara and John all just kind of dropped the line that was fed to them, that was made the point over the weekend by the AP, and then spread around by all these other sorts of different things, and then you hear the NPC chip is placed in, and they regurgitate the line.
Mainstream
Yeah.
conservatism. And what is happening here is an enormous number of people in the media are being deliberately sloppy about their terminology. And they're being deliberately sloppy about that terminology because the idea is, if I can paint my political opponents with the ugliest possible brush, if I can use large scale terms that don't really apply to them, and I can apply them to them, and I can make them seem as though they are derelict, as though they are bad people, as though they are just somehow morally negligible in some way. And that is the pattern here. And once you realize that a lot of Americans see their fellow Americans, their neighbors, as threats to them, like real true threats to who they are, then you understand that all policy making is directed at changing the system to protect them from you. And that's what this is all about.
Pretty true.
I think
mean,
that sort of thing
I
is
don't
getting
know,
worse
like-
and worse, of trying to paint it up that. Well, I mean, I'll show you. Like,
Well, yeah,
just listen
no,
to
like, I mean,
1 minute here.
Wow. Oh yeah, put that on normals.
Correct.
Yeah.
And because there is, for people coming out of a fundamentalist religion like Mormonism, let's make sure we understand what science is. Science is not a club. It's not a membership. It is a methodology.
There's people who are not Mormons or religious people. You need to explain that to John Larsen.
Well, and John Larsen, according to you, your kids are transgender, and the transgender is a metaphysical claim. It is not science-based.
He's not going
Doesn't
to
mean it's
hold on
bad.
to those real science. The Richard Feynman, Carl
Yeah.
Sagan, who had worries that science was going to become scientism. John Larsen, when it comes to all the COVID stuff, you will cock your head back and scream science.
Yeah.
About asking questions, finding answers, refining those. So yes, multiple science disciplines have come to the same conclusion, but that's not because they're in coercion with each other. It's because the evidence has led us to that point.
I think it means collusion.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it seems basic, but a whole lot of Americans are struggling with concepts like that today.
As you are.
Yeah, tell me
Well,
about
I
struggling with concepts, John.
I think we can see how this stuff happens if you look at the rise again of Christian nationalism today in
What
the United States.
rise? What are they
And
talking
it's all
about?
through the Mormon corridor up into Idaho, Utah, down in the southern states.
It was just downloaded in, so it's time to say it now.
It's just real now. There's
Yeah.
been a rise of Christian nationalism. No, I think we have exactly as much Christian nationalism as we've had for the last 20 years.
Exactly. But what I'm pointing at is, like, the second it was downloaded by that AP article, it just gets downloaded into all the brains.
Yeah. Jeez, my internet connection's going out. That downloaded thing, like, I mean, just like how many people I know, like perfectly ordinary people, never went to college, never got caught up in formal training of any of this postmodernism, critical theory stuff. And then they say, like, well, just because somebody's sex was assessed by a doctor. And it's like, holy shit, you just downloaded that into your brain.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a software patch. Like, I just believe this thing now.
Let's listen
That
to
is
some,
utterly nonsensical. And this guy.
some truth.
That would
Well, I'm not even talking about social context. I'm just trying to start by getting to the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of like getting to the truth again in social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
If I probe about what the truth is,
You keep invoking the word truth, which is condescending and rude. I'm saying to you,
how is the word truth condescending and rude?
why don't you tell me what your truth is? And you're walking on 30 seconds more of thin ice before I get up.
Yeah. I mean, I've had that conversation 10,000 times, and it's nice. I'm glad to see that, like, Matt Walsh had that and published it, because, like, that gaslighting of, like, you're being mean, and people have come to me all the time, and I've been told that I'm.
You've been told
I
that you're
think we
what?
lost connection.
I'm hearing you. Do you hear me?
My internet. Okay, it's all shitty.
I hear you.
But
You were there.
it seems to be working now. Okay.
Okay, I can
You
cut
were
it
gone
out.
for a while, but now you're back.
Okay, I heard you the whole time.
Cool.
Um,
Kara. What
do
is
you remember what
stand-up
you're saying, or
comedian
is that
going
it?
to what is the stand-up comic Kara going to instruct us in today?
First, there's this.
Like, imagine if Norm Macdonald was like, I'm a comedian. Let's talk about how you should think and feel and act.
Like consistently when I was Mormon, when I was still pretty conservative, they talk, you know how they talk about like the alt-right pipeline where it's like you listen to this guy and then you start listening to that guy, then you get more and more, and then now you're like a friggin' school shooter. Like totally agree that's a pipeline.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
just
how
think the
that works.
She's talking about Sam Harris.
She
listens to too much Sam Harris. She'll go down that. She could go down that pipeline.
See, this is one of those things where, like, I think I'm as much as an armchair expert on mass shootings as a person in my position could be, in that it's not my job. I have no formal training. It's just something that I have spent a lot of time looking into. I have read the diaries. I've spent I don't know how much time researching just for my own trying to understand this phenomenon. It's just one of these, what she just said on the basis of what I know and what I've read and what I've seen is just so fantastically stupid, just betraying how powerfully ignorant you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even know where to begin. You know, it really is like, you know, like if somebody just comes in with flat earth and you're like, oh, okay, like, do I start with gravity?
apologizing
Do I
for
start
Sam
with
Harris.
geography? Do I,
She
like,
knows
how do I,
Sam Harris's alt-right pipeline.
opposite way on the pipeline. So I feel like there's just a lot of figures that are kind of in the middle that are like would speak to me as when I was very conservative that made a lot of sense. I was like, okay, Sam Harris makes a lot of sense.
Sam Harris.
why is Sam Harris anathema now to woke Mormonism?
They
woke
have been
ex-Mormonism?
because he's anathema to all wokeism. But
Oh, I guess
And
there's
then go
that.
left
That's
from there
enough.
and go more into like atheist territory or Ricky Gervais even. So
Oh,
he's
oh,
Ricky
that
Gervais.
monster.
I got more and more questioning and more left and more
You got more
further
and more
from,
faithful. That's what you
like,
got, Kara. Was
worldview I was
more
brought up by.
More
faithful.
faithful. Yes.
because of Sam Harris, listening to his podcast every day while I renovated this house. So cannot recommend Sam Harris's books enough. Like all his audiobooks, all his podcasts absolutely changed my life. And then last is Bart Ehrman, as I needed a lot of help understanding. You know, like when you're leaving the you're looking at your options there. You're like leaving the church as Mormon, and then you're like, okay, Christianity still got to be true. And then because so many people believe it, and then you look at the Bible with any kind of critical lens, like you just applied to Mormonism, then you're like, this is worse. We talk about this in the John Larsen episodes that we did in the last couple of weeks on Mormon stories.
So part of that Tower of Babel episode is that they're pointing out to Christians that that's not where language comes from. And just like it goes a little bit back to that Peterson complaint about them. Like, what, you know, who are you guys arguing with? I know there's some people who believe that, but come on, like
Yeah,
if you're
like, I
taking on the
think
people who, you know,
your average Mormon, like if you put them on the spot, you might force them into a corner, but like they don't walk around thinking a lot about Babel. It's when people dialectically put them into the trap. The internet's being craptastic.
well, I mean,
think
here's
you're back.
Jonathan Haidt. He had a really kind of famous recent article in the Atlantic where he uses and likes the Tower of Babel imagery, and there's a lot of people who I like the Tower of Babel imagery, and it's the concept of we're going to try to build something to heaven. In the process of building to heaven, we all get our languages screwed up, and I think you should be able to see that that's exactly what's happening in academia right now. Everybody thinks they're building their tower to heaven because they've got the answers to get to everything, and everybody's language is getting screwed up. Like nobody can talk to each other anymore.
Yeah,
it's
like,
not that hard.
Because I will still take issue with, and I will still argue with people who claim that biblical mythology is historical and 100% true.
Yeah,
but they don't
there's
represent.
just not many of those that I know of, especially not in Mormons. I don't know what Mormons really think like the Tower of Babel was.
I think
was
most
where all language comes from. John Larsen himself is a linguist, got all his expertise that he was critiquing it with from his BYU degree, undergraduate degree.
Yeah,
but whatever.
But because that's the other thing. It's like, well, like, isn't John Larsen here insisting just as much that we take the story literally as not? Like, did he go into it all? Like,
exactly
did he give the Petersonian interpretation of the
no,
Bible?
they just straight talked about the people who buy it straight up and think that it's history. and you're dumb, you're not science.
Okay, but like, 'cause, yeah, there's some gray beards. There's some people that like to argue. There's I don't know. There's just the autistically religious types. But again, your average Christian family, that's not what religion is for them at all.
Yeah.
Like the only thing they take away from the Tower of Babel is the allegorical lesson.
I've never met a person in my life who needs to be set straight about the Tower of Babel.
Yeah,
I've
exactly. Yeah.
never met one, you know.
I've never encountered that. Yeah.
Like Tower of Babel. What are we talking about here? It doesn't make any sense. Like so anyway, I love Bart Ehrman is great at breaking down. And then last, my biggest recommendations on books though that just straight up changed my life: Sapiens, Tribe.
That Sapiens
It's
book.
by a guy named Sebastian.
That's
There's
that.
a couple books named
You
Tribe.
don't know
Tribe
that Sapiens
is
book?
everything.
It rings a bell, but I never.
It's written by the dude who is World Economic Forum's advisor guy.
Oh, that's
He's that
okay.
guy who says that humans have served their purpose and they're worthless now, and they should just be playing video games and taking drugs, and that's all they're good for.
Powerful entities in the world. After thousands of years, during which humans were the rulers of the world, authority and power will shift away from humans to computers, and most humans will become economically useless and politically powerless. Already today, we are beginning to see the creation of a new class of humans, the useless class. Just as the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century created the new working class, the proletariat, so now the artificial intelligence revolution is beginning to create the useless class.
He really says that. I'm not exaggerating.
He read Brave New World and thought, oh,
Yeah, exactly. They thought Brave New World was a cookbook, not a
not a cautionary tale.
He's Klaus Schwab's advisor, and he's a complete idiot. But he's an absolute transhumanist, autistic person. He thinks humans should just be shuffled away like cattle and gotten rid of and made to stop breeding and all that sorts of stuff. Whatever, you can like him, Kara, or like his book. James Lindsay did a Noah Harari, that's his name. He did a review of his book on his Twitter. If you just look up James Lindsay's thing, and James Lindsay thinks the guy's an absolute sociopath, and I do too.
Made me cry. How many nonfiction books have you read that make you cry?
So listen to this. We'll jump spots. What time you gotta go?
I got, I don't know, 10 minutes.
Okay. We'll try to zip through them.
I responded to that tweet and I said, I just want to be where the atheists are, kind of in the Little Mermaid place. I've been in an Ex-Mormon space for so long.
Wait,
and
she
I
said,
love
I just want to be where the atheists are.
Listen.
Like Tibetan Buddhism?
Listen to who she might be coming
Many
on
Hindus?
online and being somebody who she works with.
Just followed me on Twitter yesterday, and he said, "Oh, hey, it's you," because we were both tagged in something to do with Aaron Ra doing.
There it is.
Oh,
she's gonna be going on with Aaron Ra to.
Because I wonder where this is going. Because Aaron Ra is super hardcore, rationalist, but he's also a little woke. I feel like he's backed off the woke though. He's not talking about as much.
I haven't followed him enough because I got kind of sick of following him because of his wokeness. But
yeah, I mean, also it's just kind of like it's one of those things where it's like, how many times can you re-listen to somebody explaining that,
Yeah, it gets
like,
old.
Evolution is true, guys.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I get it.
Attaching to it, and I'm always just afraid of when you have like a religion or a dogma that comes and attaches a label from an outside source, giving other people saying,
what would it be like to attach labels? What would it be like to have a label from an outside source attached to you, Kara? Please explain it to me. I can't imagine the feeling.
This now live our way is so dangerous to me. It's one of the most dangerous things in the entire world. It's when people attach dogma to spirituality, and so I still love a lot of the aspects of what spirituality does, because I think it's just a normal human experience that we all should be having. Whether you do that.
What is the transgender activist movement if not attaching dogma to spirituality, you doink?
On cannabis.
Man, so I'm gonna say it because I think Jared and I are gonna cover it and do it. Jared and I are gonna do her and Sam, the one from Zelf on a Shelf, covering free will and determinism.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you're doing that with Jared, because again, like I'm just so bored of it. Like I feel like I listened to 400 hours of the Reasonable Doubts guys going into it in autistic detail, and I'm like, okay,
Well, we've been having some feelings that happens to all of us males in the gynocentric society, that we feel like we shouldn't pick on them because, oh gosh, they're just trying to flail and work it out. And then, so we have this, I think it's the Honey Badger radio call it an empathy gap. There's
Oh,
like
yeah.
a wage gap thing, but there's an empathy gap that we all just kind of naturally feel an empathy for young girls and that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
I think we gotta double in. They're putting out enough content. I mean, we'll rip on Lynn and Larsen and all that stuff, and you kind of feel fine doing it because in some sort of level, we're buying the same thing that the social justice warriors want to buy, that it's okay to rip on a white straight male, you know what I mean? But we'll pull punches. Well, maybe to be egalitarians, we got to not pull punches and just rip on them just as much. So
I don't know. God bless Kara. Like, that's the thing is, like,
I do think
Be-
she's
be
flailing. I
kind.
think she's flailing around as an ex-Mormon person trying to figure out the stuff.
like well, that thing is like, to give her a compliment, I admire her work ethic, because
Yeah.
like I would like to make a living just producing content rather than, you know, actual work. And that thing's like, while I don't think Kara's very good at it yet, like I do admire the thing, because, like, you know, I spend more time thinking about making content than actually doing it. And that's the
Me
difference.
too. I spend more
Yeah.
time imagining making it better, like if
You
I
know?
actually had editing skills or stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That thing's, you know, I mean, it's like I do with everything, you know, like the amount of time I've spent thinking about playing guitar when I could have just been playing the guitar, you know.
Well, so much
But-
of this too is like we got to just like riff and speak on it, and I imagine in my head that I could really like sit down and make reasoned arguments that covers every single point I wanted to make on every single one of these things with a highlight reel and a clip show, and because I think I could do that. I don't got the time for that. You know?
Yeah. No, the other thing is, like, I don't know. I got to come up with something to write things down, because like I always have ideas, like, because to do content-y, intranet-y stuff, like lists, I'll have the little brief flash of it, but I'll be running around at work or something, and then it'll be gone from my mind. But
Well, let's hear her to close off.
yeah.
Deconstruct some deconstructing deconstructions and deconstruct some capitalism
Oh my God.
and
Okay.
patriarchy for.
So this leads into this question somebody asked on Instagram. Did deconstructing Mormonism pull other threads for you? Capitalism, racism, and sexism. This is one of the biggest, most
How do
this is-
those
this is-
three things just go together? That's just those are three sides of a three-sided coin.
Don't you know capitalism? is
Racism and sex.
the
You
root
can't
of
have them
all
without the
evil?
other.
You
Yeah.
know?
To be
I could talk
capitalist
about-
is to be racist is to be sexist. That's the implication there. How retarded is that?
my deconstruction from being a pretty hardcore conservative for just the same amount of
I
time that I
don't
talk
believe
about
that
Mormonism, and I'm
she
not-
was ever a hardcore conservative. I don't believe
I
that.
believe she played the role of one. Like she spent like time acting like she understood the stuff. She put on the t-shirt.
Yeah.
not kidding. It's just I can't talk about it very much because I always try to make content for the Kara that would have listened 3 years ago, and I would have listened to arguments about Mormonism, but anything that you talk about capitalism or BLM or gun control, my brain just would filter that through. Okay, dumb
Well,
commie
there she goes.
trash,
She's
you know, like
admitting it.
Yeah, she called them dumb commie trash. She's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
it was
So,
so
yeah, she just
I
admitted
was
what you just said. That she didn't think about it. Yeah.
this whole package and just like a smart ass conservative on Twitter that just thought, you know, everybody was just like a lefty idiot, you know? So right when I left the Mormon church, I was at my peak of the most conservative that I had ever been. I was going to the UN that was in Salt Lake. I was helping put on a speech about traditional family roles. Well, basically save the world. That's basically the speech that I was helping put on.
It would if
Oh.
people did kind of get back up and on having their whole traditional families, it would make a better world.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, this is also her tacitly admitting what we have said all along. People are out of the church what they were in the church, and so when you were in the church, you were a busybody talking about stuff you didn't really understand.
You
because
didn't
had a
know your
mega-
own side
yeah,
very well.
You didn't even know what you're talking about, but you had a megalomaniacal devotion and
Yeah.
mission to save the world. And here you are, not a Mormon, not knowing what you're talking about, still trying to save the world. Nothing
More
has
the same.
changed.
I was just talking earlier to some other guys saying like people act like if you got scrupulosity inside the church that I left the church and I beat scrupulosity. No, you didn't. You're the same freaking person.
Yeah. When I
With
was
a bunch of people-
Mormon, I didn't know what I was talking about. But now,
The nonprofit that I was volunteering for with Elaine Dalton from like the Young Women's General Presidency. I was my shelf had just broke. I was also super conservative. But now I knew Mormonism wasn't true, but I wasn't sure what to do about all these conservative values that I was really heavily invested in. Like I was so in it.
So did you deconstruct them with real deconstructing methods, deconstructing techniques?
in these conservative lanes. I was listening to Ben Shapiro every day. I have so many stories about deconstructing the ideas that I thought were so true that I got from Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or Gavin McInnes or
I do know. I know. Gavin McInnes, right?
Oh my god.
Come on.
Really, like Gavin, like I watch this stuff.
She's running around with a Tig Notaro, and like we're supposed to believe she's listening to Gavin McInnes beyond like
But
one.
even like, because also just like those three comprise Ben Shapiro, Crowder, and Gavin McInnes. Like Shapiro and Crowder, you could put, I think, together pretty close in a Venn diagram. McInnes is another thing.
McInnes is a whole different universe. Yeah.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on and on. So, but what I want to say is that the same value that I had then, it's still the same value now, which is reducing childhood trauma and that the world will be a better place if children have less trauma, basically. And I thought the avenue to do that was
What a brave stance.
through conservative values, was with religion, was with the redemption that you find in Christ,
Racism is bad.
I never considered.
was with the nuclear family, was with people living up to their responsibilities to be good parents. So you'll notice that there's a lot of things
that. Oh, was she still holding on to that? Is what she's saying, or
in what I just said. I've never explained this before. Like, I really don't like talking about this, but you'll notice that
because you haven't thought it out.
Like, what I said still has a couple through lines to what I want to do now. I want to reduce childhood trauma. I want people to be able to thrive into adulthood as much as possible. The problem is
unlike everybody else who is fine with the current rate of childhood trauma.
That religion,
yeah, you got the groomers,
was the best avenue because it was the best avenue for my parents, or was the best avenue for me, that religion is the way we reduce childhood trauma by encouraging people to be more religious. And then that started to fall apart, okay? Because there are so many, again, dogmatic problems with adhering to these constructs that are just not based in evidence, whether that has to do with
constructs that are not based in evidence, and you have to adhere to them.
The image that just popped in my head is that you know, the whole like when you're a hammer and everything's a nail. And that's the thing. It's that, like, because it sounds to me that with Kara, all that happened is that she was a Mormon.
Shirts.
Yeah, she was a Mormon walking around with a hammer that said Mormon on it, just smashing everything. And then she put down the hammer that said Mormon and picked up the hammer that said, you know, woke spiritualism or whatever.
Yeah.
And she just like didn't skip a beat, and she's just walking around smashing stuff again.
Yeah, exactly.
The deconstructor.
I'll jump a little bit.
Who would do that? They were only concerned about like nuclear family traumas and divorces and children of, you know, LGBTQ parents who don't have access to both like their sperm donor and their egg donor, basically. I was like, I care about trauma from children. If I'm serious about it, I have to deconstruct capitalism. And
what? What was the first country to make child labor illegal, Kara? You moron! Come on!
You got to deconstruct capitalism.
And all that stuff. So that just totally led me on a path. I've never talked about this before. I guess I'm wearing Sam Shelley shirt right now. Hey girl. And it's a big deal. It was a really big deal, and I can't talk about it very much, but it was just as big as of a mind F. And then everything about that just leads into American exceptionalism. And I had this whole worldview that Mormonism was, you know, based on like America is this chosen land that's going to restore the gospel. And so while I knew deep down as a conservative Mormon, there are a lot of things that make me uncomfortable about this country, the ends justify the means, basically. Like, this is just the way that it is because we're still God's chosen country. So at the end of the day, is it really that big of a deal if we have a bunch of mass shootings or whatever, because Jesus is coming anyway, not realizing that thoughts and prayers literally aren't going to cut it. And there are prescriptions, policy ideas. And do you want to be on the half of the country who's just praying that things will get better and then Jesus will come? Or do you want to be on the side who's like, let's fix it? So
you're going to fix it.
Okay, first off, they're not just praying. Like, they also like go to work as police officers and protect the country. You know?
Who's
like,
going to fix it?
They pray and do stuff. Like,
yeah. And then there's the other level that drives me crazy. Part of what I was talking about in the last thing is that there's nothing that drives me crazier than people who think they can fix it when they don't have any answers. And so many of the different people right now about the gun control stuff, they haven't looked into, read, or studied any part about it, but they think if they scream in the air, we need to fix it, that they're on the team that's
gun control is the left's version of thoughts and prayers. But no, the other thing that she just said right there, to again illustrate what we've been saying all along, because she said, you know, when I was a Mormon, I believed the ends justified the means. We've already watched you, Kara, and John explain that it's okay for you guys to insult and demean and make people feel bad, just as long as you're spreading the message that you're spreading now. So again, nothing has changed. Again, the ends justify your means.
Everything just helped me move further left, being a cold-hearted atheist. Call me bitch. Thanks.
She's a
Did she say
cold-hearted-
commie?
She called herself a commie. Another part, she called herself a socialist too. It was part of the things I'm gonna pull up here. So
Okay.
you,
Well,
you
she's
just
already
punched,
got that in.
you punched the card. You checked all the boxes as soon as you went that way.
See, and that's things like, and I want to give her all the benefit of the doubt because I'm just guessing she knows nothing about Marx or any of that.
There's maybe some
think-
irony to it.
Yeah. Well, it's actually bringing up one thing I wanted to bring up was kind of just in my adventures. Come on now, but if you go to Wikipedia, and because I've mentioned this before, where like for a long time I thought like, what is up with Palestine and Palestinian politics? And if you just go to the Wikipedia article list of political parties in the state of Palestine, it's dominated by commies and has been for 100 years. It's almost entirely commies.
But they're going to be pro-Palestine and pro-commies, just like
Yeah.
most commies are.
But that's the thing is like I remember like it was fairly recently, I think in the last year or two, when I'm like, okay, what the hell is up? You know, because I mean, part of it was me studying Arabic and like I just wanted to go see what was up. And I'm like, what is up with them? Like, why does the media, the mainstream media's coverage of Palestine, like there's just something off with it? I was like, I'm missing something. So then I just went and looked it up and I'm like, oh, they're all socialist. Like they don't say that Fatah are socialists. For some reason, they don't mention that. They just say, "Oh, they want the liberation of Palestine from the evil Israelis."
Yeah,
You know?
it's so crazy when you get into any one of those countries and you start to see that no matter how whatever tribal you thought they were, that they fully got on board with all whatever's communism or fascism. Like every single one of them went down that road, no matter how backwoods Viet Cong-y, whatever they seemed like. They all picked up on the socialism as a.
Well, that's it. But we're seeing right here. This is a great example of people who are like, "Well, how the hell did people get captured by Marxism, especially ordinary people?" We're seeing it with Kara.
Yeah.
It's just that you just associate. We're looking at it's on the screen right now. Capitalism is racism, is sexism.
Mhm.
Well, what's the opposite of capitalism? Socialism. So if capitalism is racism and sexism, socialism has to be not racism and not sexism. Ta-da!
Capitalism is also the Christian
Go
nationalism.
read how the Soviet Union treated ethnic minorities and Jews. You idiot.
Or Che Guevara. Or
Che Guevara treated gays.
Or Fidel Castro.
Or the Kim dynasty of Korea. Like, see, that's one thing that's kind of fascinating. Because like,
And there's a reason they use that phrase, "You'll be the first against the wall," for all sorts of people who claim to be allies of them, and they'll directly say to them, "You and I are going to have a problem as soon as we get to the other side of this revolution."
Ich bin Anarchist. Gemüßigter Anarchist. Cool. Dann können wir Freunde sein bis zur Revolution. Danach wird's natürlich schwierig.
Alrighty, I better
So
go.
that's
Last little bit.
question. Checking in with the chat. Wait, Mormonism can be wrong, and a lot of feminists can be a little crazy too at the same time, right? Yeah, there's extremists everywhere, and my worldview
Tell us
though, like I
about
was
it.
saying, was this narrow. I was only looking at like the craziest.
What's an example of
the
feminist
ones who are
extremism?
screaming at the sky, like the ones that are on those highlight reels of just the craziest people that you've ever seen, thinking that all feminists wanted to do was just taking the worst faith interpretations of the worst feminists who are like, let's lock men up and that we don't need them. Those feminists totally exist, but
Okay.
every
She's struggling.
word benefit that I have today are from mainstream feminist ideas, giving me the breakdown in the gender roles that allow me to even exist. So trust me, you have no idea.
She wasn't
if you
allowed
wanna
to
know,
exist
former
until she
Kara,
was a
like,
feminist.
I was the biggest anti-feminist. Holy shit.
Before feminism, Kara was not allowed to
I was on a
exist.
trajectory to be the most obnoxious trad wife you have ever seen. So
Now
there's
she's
no
got-
argument that there are
now she's a
annoying
Now you're-
hippie
yeah.
pothead.
So again,
Now
the
you're
maternal
now you're an
feminism that I was
obnoxious
talking about,
wokey.
they changed my life. They talked to me in a way about a type of feminism that I hadn't thought about that helped me
Which was a
branch into
feminism that
other
says
ideas that I was
demonizing
fine with.
patriarchy
So
at all.
I used to
Yeah.
say, like, when people would say to me, like, fuck the patriarchy, I used to say, God bless the patriarchy. I used to believe that the patriarchy has done nothing but good. And while I can say that there's a structure, like everything does need a structure, but
Oh.
has the patriarchy done like so much enough to say that just like God bless it. Like, no, not at all. Like it's time to absolutely move on to much healthier structures and deconstruct from patriarchal ones that are usually just based on these constructs around God and who's given authority and who's not, that are totally bunk.
The patriarchy isn't real, Kara. It's not real.
Yeah,
it is not real.
To me, it sounds almost like announcing, yeah, language comes from the Tower of Babel. Like the pre-assumed bullcrap that you just spouted out right there is
oh wow. Good time.
That's what we got time for today. We'll do a little bit more in the future. If Flip gets more time, maybe we should just try to keep him around an hour. Although I have infinity other things open, and I still thought we could get to him within an hour, but we got distracted by talking about every single little wackadoodle thing, as we always do, because it turns out each subject is 1,000,000 miles wide and a foot deep, which is a phrase I got from John Larsen. But
yeah.
Anyway,
it was a good analogy. He's got it exactly right.
Anything to say? Anything to add? Anything to do? Yep.
I don't think so. Get yourself one of those bridges and fix your jazz master. It'll change your life.
Oh, well, I'm going to start editing this. If you think about it and you want me to take any of that out, let me know.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I should speak my truth, right? All right.
Yep, that's what I do.
Cool.
All righty, cool.
We'll see you
later.